weaker you appear. The more you react, the more power you give away. And the harder you try to prove yourself, the more obvious it becomes that someone got under your skin. Let's be honest, in a world full of noise, silence is no longer passivity, it's strategy. When your words are twisted, when truth becomes ammunition, when your reaction becomes their entertainment, this is no longer a conversation. It's a psychological game. And the louder you get, the more you've already lost. But here's the twist. You don't need to fight back. You don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to explain yourself to be right. You only need one thing: silence and time. Because the moment you stop, karma starts working. You fall silent, but the universe doesn't. Truth has a gravitational pull, and it always returns to where it belongs. In this video, we'll break down 7 situations where a wise man chooses absolute silence, not out of fear, but out of strength, to protect his energy, to preserve his dignity, and to let the weight of their own actions crush them without lifting a single finger, because silence isn't the absence of words, it's the presence of control. Stick with me until the final chapter, because the last one will forever change the way you see silence. Few things feel more unjust than being lied about. The instinct is immediate. You want to defend yourself. Correct the narrative. Prove that you're not what they say you are. But here's the truth. No one wants to hear. The more you explain yourself, the more suspicious you look. The more you chase clarity, the more chaos they create. Because those who spread lies aren't looking for truth. They're looking for a reaction. They want to shake your calm. They want to see you flinch. They want you to perform your innocence so they can twist it into proof of guilt. And here's the trap. If you react, you've already lost. This is where Stoicism draws the line. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If it is not true, do not say it. If it is not right, do not do it." And that's it. No need to plead. No need to explain. You live by your own integrity, not by their version of your story. Because truth has something lies will never have: endurance. Lies spread fast, but they die just as quickly. Truth. It takes longer, but it doesn't need defending. It reveals itself with time. Let me tell you a story. There was a man, let's call him James. He was accused at work of something he didn't do. Whispers spread. People distanced themselves. His first impulse, to prove his innocence. But instead, he chose silence. He stayed calm. He did his job. He let his actions speak. Weeks later, the truth came out. The accuser exposed for past manipulations. And James, because he never fought back, he never lost face. He rose above the noise, and his dignity stayed untouched. That's stoic strength. So, how do you respond when someone lies about you? First, trust the long game. Falsehoods are loud, but truth is lasting. Let time do its quiet work. Second, anchor yourself in your values. When you know who you are, the noise outside can't touch you. Third, let karma speak for you. Those who lie often live in cycles of drama, and sooner or later they lie themselves into a corner. At the end of the day, silence is not surrender. It's self-respect. You're not hiding. You're rising above the noise, above the pettiness, above the lie. Let them talk. Let them spin, and let the truth do what it always does: return. Betrayal doesn't just hurt. It shifts the ground beneath your feet. It comes from those you trusted: friends, partners, family. And when it hits, it feels like your chest collapses inward. The first impulse is to confront, to ask, how could you, to demand why, to plead, do you even realize what you've done? But here's the brutal truth. People who betray you have already justified it in their mind. They don't see what they've done. Or worse, they do, and they simply don't care. And the more you try to get closure, the more you reopen your own wound. You see, when someone betrays you, what they really want is your energy, your reaction, your pain, your confusion. Why? Because that gives them power. That proves they mattered. So what happens when you give them nothing? No rage, no revenge, no explanation. Just silence. That's when they realize they didn't just lose access to your words. They lost access to your soul. Seneca once wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." Betrayal is friction. It stings, but it clarifies. It separates what's real from what's convenient. And it forces you to confront one hard truth. Not everyone you love is meant to stay. Let me tell you a story. There was a woman, let's call her Sarah. She had a best friend for over a decade. They shared everything: dreams, doubts, victories. But one day, Sarah found out that this friend had betrayed her, exposed her secrets, undermined her success. For what? Jealousy, insecurity, ego. At first, Sarah wanted a confrontation, to unleash everything, to make her feel the pain she caused. But instead, she chose silence. No fight, no drama, just a quiet exit. And do you know what happened? The friend waited for the blow-up. She was ready for the chaos. But all she got was absence. And that silence, it haunted her. Because silence has weight. It echoes louder than any argument ever could. So when betrayal finds you, and it will remember this, first, accept who they really are. Don't cling to who you thought they were. That version no longer exists. Second, don't waste breath on someone who already wrote your value in pencil. You don't need to make them understand what they chose to ignore. Third, walk away without explanation, because silence forces reflection, and reflection is the one thing betrayers avoid most. At the end of the day, you are not the one who lost. They are the one who lost access to someone who was loyal, real, and rare. Let them live with that, not through punishment, but through your absence and your peace. Insults are cheap. That's why the weak use them. When someone insults you through sarcasm, passive aggression, or a direct verbal jab, they're not trying to speak truth. They're trying to provoke. They want your reaction, because your reaction is their validation. And the moment you snap back, raise your voice, or defend yourself, you've handed them exactly what they wanted: control. It doesn't matter how clever your comeback is. If you respond, you've already played their game. And here's the part most people don't realize. You don't need to win the argument. You just need to not enter it. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy, Read that again. When someone insults you, they're inviting you down to their level, hoping you'll abandon your dignity and meet them in the mud. But a Stoic doesn't live in the mud. A Stoic doesn't flinch, doesn't fire back. He just observes, calm, still, unbothered. Let me tell you a story. There was a man, let's call him David. He had just earned a well-deserved promotion. At a company event, a jealous co-worker took a jab at him in front of the whole room. Wow, I guess they're giving promotions to just anyone now. Everyone turned to David, waiting for the reaction. But he didn't argue. He didn't defend. He looked the man in the eyes, smiled, and said absolutely nothing. Just silence. No comeback. No drama. And in that moment, David didn't just win the room. He won the war. Because silence, it strips power. And nothing frustrates an insulter more than being ignored. So, how do you handle insults? First, recognize what they're fishing for. They don't want the truth. They want to disrupt your peace. Don't let them. Second, let your stillness speak. When your face doesn't flinch, when your tone stays calm, it sends a message louder than words. You don't control me. Third, hold your frame. Confidence doesn't argue. Self-respect doesn't explain. When you refuse to lower yourself, they rise to nothing. At the end of the day, you don't need to match their noise. You need to master your silence. Because real strength doesn't yell. It doesn't need to. And the most devastating answer to an insult is indifference. Some people don't want resolution. They want attention. They don't want to solve problems. They want to control the narrative. And the most effective way to do that, play the victim. They rewrite the story. They remove their role. They twist facts, shed tears. And suddenly, you become the villain. And the more you try to explain, the worse it gets. Because to everyone else, it looks like you're attacking someone who's already hurting. They've flipped the script. Now you're the aggressor. And they're the poor, misunderstood soul. This is not conflict. This is performance. And you've just been cast as the enemy. Stoic wisdom warns us of this trap. Epictetus once said, "To complain is always non-productive and never appropriate." Victim players don't complain for solutions. They complain for sympathy. And if you step in to defend yourself, you validate their performance. The only winning move is silence. Let me tell you a story. There was a woman, let's call her Rachel. She had a co-worker who constantly twisted reality. Whenever she was held accountable, she'd cry, deflect, and shift blame. Rachel tried to stay logical. She brought proof. She stayed calm. She explained the facts. And it backfired every time. Because while Rachel was speaking facts, the other woman was playing emotions. And in the court of public opinion, emotion wins when reason argues too long. So Rachel stopped. No more defense. No more counterpoints. Just quiet. Grounded. Stoic silence. And over time, the truth surfaced. People started seeing the pattern. They realized this person always had a sob story, always a new enemy, always a new injustice. And just like that, the act collapsed. So how do you handle a manipulative victim? First, Don't defend yourself. They're not listening. They're acting. And the audience loves drama. Don't feed it. Second, stay emotionally detached. Observe. Don't absorb. Let them drown in the chaos they created. Third, trust, karma, and repetition. People may believe them once, maybe twice, but patterns don't lie. Eventually, masks slip. At the end of the day, you don't owe clarity to someone who profits from confusion. Let them play their role. Let them gather their audience. Let them run their script. Because sooner or later, the show ends. And silence. That's how you bring down the curtain. The greatest insult is not what they say to you. It's what they no longer notice. You show up. You give. You care. You make the calls. Send the messages. Offer your presence. And in return, you get silence. Indifference. Disinterest. There's no explosion. No dramatic betrayal. Just the slow erosion of your value in their eyes. And here's the bitter truth. The more you try to prove your worth, the less they see it. Because people don't value what's always available. They value what they're afraid to lose. And when you're constantly present, constantly reaching out, you become a background noise in their world. You don't become indispensable. You become invisible. This is where Stoicism hands you your power back. Seneca once said, "Time discovers truth." And sometimes, the truth they need to discover is your absence. Let me tell you a story. There was a man, let's call him Jake. He was the consistent one, the friend who checked in, the colleague who remembered your birthday, the partner who never forgot to ask how your day was. But slowly, he noticed something. No one asked about his day. No one reached out, unless he did first. If he stopped calling, days turned into weeks of silence. That's when he realized he wasn't being valued. He was being convenient. So he made a key decision. No arguments. No speeches. He simply stopped. And the result? The ones who truly cared reached out. The ones who didn't, they disappeared. And that, right there, was his answer. So, what do you do when your worth is ignored? First, stop chasing. If they can't see your value while you're present, let them feel it when you're gone. Second, say nothing. Silence forces awareness. When your presence is missing, your value becomes undeniable. Third, observe who makes the effort. The people who matter won't need a reminder. They'll notice the shift, and they'll move toward you, not away. At the end of the day, you don't prove your worth with effort. You prove it with distance, because those who deserve your energy will feel the silence, and those who don't were never meant to have it. Let your absence speak. Let it echo in the space they once took for granted, and never beg to be seen by those who closed their eyes. Some people don't want peace. They want a reaction. They poke. They prod. They say things they know will sting, not because they're brave, but because it's the only way they feel powerful. And the moment you flinch, they win. The moment you argue, they feed. The moment you let your emotions rise, they know they've got you. Here's the truth most people miss. The goal isn't conflict. The goal is control. They want to break your frame, to make you act out of their emotion. And if they can trigger you, They become the puppeteer pulling strings from behind a fake smile. But here's where Stoicism becomes a shield. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That is the essence of self-mastery. You can't stop others from provoking you, but you can deny them the one thing they crave most, your reaction. Let me tell you a story. There was a man, let's call him Adam. He had a co-worker who thrived on chaos. Every meeting, every interaction there was a jab, a sarcastic comment, a passive-aggressive insult, always framed just vague enough to avoid consequences. At first, Adam would defend himself. He'd argue, justify, explain, and every time he left the room, more exhausted than before, until one day, he made a shift. The next time that co-worker tried to provoke him, Adam looked at him, smiled faintly, gave a calm nod, and said nothing. Just silence. No eye rolls. No sighs. No tension. Pure detachment. And the result? The co-worker flinched. Because when you're used to playing with fire, you don't know what to do when the match doesn't light. Eventually, he gave up, because without fuel, even the most toxic flame dies out. So how do you handle provocation? First, recognize the pattern. Repetition reveals motive. If someone always stirs conflict, it's not personal. It's strategic. Second, hold your frame. Do not let emotional bait pull you out of alignment. You control your breath, your tone, your presence. Third, let your calm be your power. The more unshakable you become, the more powerless they feel. At the end of the day, not everything that provokes you deserves your energy. And not every opponent is worth a response. The strongest man in the room isn't the loudest. He's the one everyone tries to provoke, and no one can move. Because his silence isn't empty. It's armor. Regret is loud, but silence is louder. There comes a moment after they've taken you for granted, after they've ignored your value, after they assumed you'd always be there, when they realize you're gone, and suddenly, the silence they once overlooked becomes deafening. They start remembering the way you listened, the way you showed up, the way you gave more than you received, and it hits them. They didn't just lose a person, they lost a presence, a light, a constant, but by then, it's too late. Here's what you need to understand. If someone only starts to value you after you leave, they never truly valued you when it counted. And the worst thing you can do is go back just because they finally noticed. Epictetus once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And self-mastery means this. You don't return to places that broke you. You don't lower your standards to comfort their guilt. You don't explain your silence. You let it speak for you. Let me tell you a story. There was a woman, let's call her Olivia. She gave everything to her relationship: time, love, energy. Her partner, he got comfortable, took her for granted, assumed her presence was permanent. Until one day, she left. No argument, no breakdown, no emotional exit, just a quiet departure. At first, he brushed it off. Then came the weeks, the months, the unanswered calls, the echo of a presence he didn't realize he needed until it was no longer his. He begged, apologized, promised change. But Olivia, she had already healed in silence, and that silence became her freedom. So what do you do when someone regrets losing you? First, don't give them an easy way back. If your value was invisible then, your absence needs to remain visible now. Second, resist the urge to explain. Let them feel the weight of their actions without cushioning it with closure. Third, stand firm in your silence. Not out of spite, but out of respect for yourself. At the end of the day, they had access to you, and they wasted it. Now, let them sit with that truth. Alone, because your silence, that's not punishment. That's wisdom. It says, you don't get to walk in and out of my life and still expect the door to stay open. Let them regret. Let them remember. But don't let them return. You don't owe them a second chance. You owe yourself peace. You don't need to yell to be heard. You don't need to fight to win. And you don't need to speak to make a statement. In a world addicted to noise, silence is radical. It's not weakness. It's not surrender. It's the language of those who no longer need validation. Because when you fall silent, you take back your power. You step out of the trap. You let time, truth, and karma finish the sentence you chose not to write. A stoic man doesn't chase approval. He doesn't beg for closure. He doesn't collapse under noise. He simply steps back and lets the universe do what it does best, restore balance. So the next time someone lies, betrays, insults, provokes, or regrets, don't respond. Don't explain. Don't perform. Just watch and wait, because karma doesn't need your help. It just needs your silence. If this message hit something deep in you, if you found truth between the lines, then don't just click away. Subscribe to Think Stoic 101, where strength is quiet, wisdom is sharp, and every word is built to last. And if you know someone who needs this message, send it, share it, or let your own silence echo it forward.